morning. This month we're talking about depth at Creative Mornings with Reale. What are you excited about to talk for today?
I'm just excited to dig deep with everyone. It's going to get kind of weird.
Kind of weird and deep. Welcome to Creative Mornings. We're ready to welcome her and get started. Let's ride. Yay, Ashley.
Hi. Thank you for fixing that. My name is Ashley, and there are so many of us out there. So this just brings my heart so much joy because, man, I just know so many of us. And I kind of told this joke during the peak of COVID that, like, we are like COVID. There are so many Ashleys. And some of us are more dangerous than others. But I'm a nice variant, so you're in luck today. Yeah. Okay, that helped me to feel like a little more loose, because I'm kind of nervous. This is my family, and I really wanted to have a picture of my son sticking out his tongue also, but he refused. So you don't get a tongue shot from my son Wyatt. Okay, so who am I really? I'm a mom of 2 cute people and 2 fluffy dogs. I enjoy dancing in my living room, nowhere else. Well, sometimes other places. And then I like hiking and bubble tea also. So if you ever want to take me out for bubble tea, I won't say no. Also, if you tell me a bad dad joke, I'm probably going to love you forever. I identify as a creative person, but I have a really hard time owning my creative endeavors, which is making this morning really hard for me because, it's just hard to talk about yourself. So, okay, this is my project called Love Everywhere. We have a table over there, and I'm kind of just giving things away. It's a pay what you want model, but if you like something and you don't want to pay, take it, because I'm just trying to unload some stuff. But the basic idea is that Love Everywhere exists to inspire and bring hope to people through these hidden notes of encouragement, and they've been all over the world, and we've put out over 33,000 of them, hand-stamped all of them. My wrist is really tired. And then also, super fun, I partnered with Reebok, which is super fun, for a brand activation, and we put out 200,000 of these cards inside sneaker boxes globally, which was amazing. And we did that for International Women's Day in 2019. I've hosted, directed, and edited a sports podcast, and I had never done that before, so that was really fun to learn how to do. And most recently, I directed a web series called Mix It Up. And please scan this QR code, take your phones out right now and scan that while I get some water, because I'm really excited. It just launched earlier this month, and there's a few episodes. I worked on it with my coworker and friend Carla. And Casey is here also. She's one of the bartenders. So that's that. Okay, let's see. On top of that, I've written a book. Yeah, and it's coming out sometime in the next year. Claire is my editor. She's in the back. Love you, Claire. Thank you for all your work. And I'm saying it out loud so that it actually happens in 23, because, life can kind of get away from you sometimes. So please, everyone here, hold me accountable to that. It's tentatively called Maybe We're All Diamonds. And basically, it's about embracing the ugly mess and chaos of life and bringing purpose and clarity to offer a fresh perspective of self-acceptance over fear, so that people can see love where they did not before, which is basically what life is all about anyways. So the topic today is not imposter syndrome, but these two clouds pretending to be a rainbow. Help me, because if I can announce to you guys that I don't feel like I deserve to be here right now, then I can like life hack this and get past it. So I have imposter syndrome. Let's go. All right, so I was telling my friend that today's topic was depth, and it's kind of been hilarious because every time I say depth, people think I say death. And then I was just kind of like, it kind of does feel like dying a little bit, because you're putting yourself out there, you're going deeper into like this darkness of yourself and trying to like sort out all of the things, and I feel like I'm dying right now. So why not embrace the thought of death? But I promise it's not going to be super morbid. So, depth is more than just perceived distance between background and foreground in a photograph or painting. It's a character trait that, when harnessed, can transform the way we communicate, create, and connect. This morning, we're going to dig in and find out how to unearth it. I've got 5 super duper tools for digging deep, and this will be for both your life and your art. So grab your little shovels, and I'll cue the concept flow chart. This is my brain. Please don't feel like you have to read all of that, and we're not going to cover all of that because it's just too much to talk about. But several weeks ago, when I began thinking about this topic, I did some word association, and of course, the most obvious things that came to mind were deep sea diving, submarines, pirates, buried treasure, digging holes, paleontology, and my personal favorite, lasagna. Yeah, so let's talk about lasagna. This brings us to our very first tool for digging deep. Don't be afraid to share your experiences. Sharing is caring, right? And who doesn't love it when a friend shows up with a giant platter of hot, steamy lasagna for you to eat with them? Sharing our experiences is what unlocks our very sense of togetherness and community, which adds richness and depth at every level. But here's my hot take. I think people are like lasagna. Stick with me, and I'm going to read this because it's very important. We're all just dry noodles going through life until we do some digging, and then hard things happen. The water heats up, we get tossed into a boiling pot, and suddenly we're being layered with a bunch of other ingredients, and we're screaming, "We didn't ask for this!" At this point, things can get sort of messy. Some of us are super saucy. Some of us are super cheesy. Some of us have dark burn spots on the top because, if you're like me, you've been left in the oven too long. And that's what happens whenever I cook, so. The point is that while every recipe can vary, we're all still just lasagna. It wasn't until I started sharing my recipe, my experiences, that I discovered my sauce wasn't exactly unique. Everyone has hard stuff in their past, but we're all just some sort of noodle, tomato sauce, and cheese combination. Every single one of us has navigated this beautiful, brutal life to the best that we can, and it's all that heartache and heaviness and joy and glory that has shaped us into who we are as people and as artists. That's what binds us together, and it gifts us with the ability to empathize and to create and celebrate with others. It's the very thing that gives us the perspective to look at a single painting and interpret it in 5 very different ways. Sharing our experiences is the key that unlocks the richness of depth. Staying on the surface, whether in creation or a simple conversation, is merely just like eating the top of a layer of lasagna. You're not going to get all that flavor, and you're probably going to be hungry again in like 5 minutes. Tool number 2. Embrace what comes up as you explore. This part is not fun. It's ironic that depth was the topic that was chosen for this month's meeting and that the universe placed me here to talk to you about it, because I think I could be maybe the leader of a master class on how to avoid it. I kind of also want to run away right now, so that's also part of it. I think that avoiding depth can lead to all kinds of pain and frustration, because when we avoid depth, what we're really doing is resisting being our authentic selves. We put energy into following others and trying to blend in or act normal instead. But newsflash, all of us are born creatives, and we're not meant to blend in, and we'll never be normal, and that's okay. Creative people have an insatiable curiosity, and we're meant for exploration. We're meant to push the limits. We're meant to defy authority and to break the rules. I was brought up in a family that highly valued appearances and superficiality over deep conversation and connection. Facing the truth, talking about hard feelings, and cultivating empathy, we didn't do that. Being curious could lead to asking questions, and asking questions could lead to enlightenment, and good Christian children should never be enlightened. It's kind of the devil's playground, or at least that's the way it was presented to me, so we just didn't do it. If you haven't picked up on it yet, I came from a pretty religious family. We actually weren't super religious, we just followed the rules so that we appeared to be on the outside. At one point during our churchy years, my dad was growing weed in our family basement and selling it. And not too long after that, he became a church youth pastor. So it was kind of like weird Walter White Breaking Bad vibes before it was cool. But the rules for growing up in a strange family like mine were pretty simple. Rule number 1, do not touch daddy's basement garden. Rule number 2, don't question God. Rule number 3, don't question the church. Rule number 4, don't question the authority of any of your elders. They know more than you do. And rule number 5, always do exactly as you're told. All these rules have one main theme: blind obedience. That's the antithesis of depth. It was very much a do as I say, not as I do culture, clearly. But what I learned from living in this type of environment is that when we don't ask questions and try to get a deeper understanding of things, it's impossible to expand and grow. So, coming from this sort of boxed-in background, how do I end up here today talking to you about the very concept that I was conditioned to avoid? Getting here has been a long and layered journey, and I've had some dark and low chapters. I promise that we won't do all of that today, because we'd be here all day. But I fought to unlock my own definition of who I want to be, what and how I want to create, and what I hope my legacy will be when I'm gone. I have to admit that I still struggle with allowing myself to pursue a deeper life. I think I might always be a constant work in progress. We never fully arrive. We just find new opportunities to dig deeper. The universe always gives us opportunities. Sometimes, if we hesitate to see it, we find ourselves being pushed off the edge into a dark hole of unignorable change. It forces us to dig our way out until we finally recognize the lesson and take action. The beauty here is that there's always a net to catch us when we get pushed. But what is depth, and how can you define simple terminology for something that seems so grand as life and creativity? It starts with you. To fully encounter depth is to step into the freedom of allowing yourself to be truly known. And this can't happen until you truly know yourself. Oh, the inner work this requires, right? The excavation of the heart and soul, the deconstructing, the unlearning, removing false beliefs. Oh my God, the vulnerability. Tool number 3 for digging deep is obviously vulnerability. And I can't think of let's get vulnerable without thinking of let's get physical. So, welcome to my brain again. Death requires vulnerability, and according to my therapist, that's just being emotionally honest, which sounds so easy, right? Making art of any kind requires at least some level of emotional honesty. But how do you get there if you're not willing to do the messy work of cultivating self-awareness? There's a good chance exploration like this is going to take you to a few dark places. No one ever goes frolicking happily into the darkness. Just doesn't happen. Most of us want to avoid pain, heartbreak, and suffering at all costs. Ignorance is bliss, and everything is fine. It's totally fine. I mean, it's really fine. If there's a delay, it's ruining my joke. There we go. Okay. So, what I really want you to know today more than anything is that you deserve a life that is so stellarly more than fine that astronauts at the International Space Station can see it from their tiny little space windows. That beam is me. So my first question to you this morning is, can you give yourself permission to unearth something great? Okay, so we've talked about a lot of really weird stuff already. We've gone from lasagna to whatever this is, to now being paleontologists of vulnerability. We're gonna dig so deep today that we make Brene Brown proud. This is actually not quite as hard as it sounds because the universe, again, will present you with loads of opportunity to stretch this muscle once you tune your heart to the frequency of being open to learning. The world, this galaxy, and all the magical stardust that lies within you is longing for you to answer this call. And the big Hollywood plot twist is that you're the one that's on the other end when you say hello. What? Here's an example of a recent opportunity I had to get my shovel and start digging when I really didn't want to and wasn't expecting it. As a single mother, I started dating again. I was pretty terrified to get back out there and found myself on a very new second date that I thought was like gonna be something. And it turned out it is, because he's sitting right there today. It was the holiday season, and I had just been given this new game called We're Not Really Strangers. I don't know if any of you have ever played it. Super fun. Not great for second dates if you're not really ready to get in there. We were asking each other some really insightful questions, and by the second question, I was not happy that I brought this game. I just did not want to answer any questions, so I did what I always do, which is dance around the answers, not really give anything of substance, because that's what I've been conditioned to do. And he was so great. He answered every question, no problem, just smile on his face the whole time, and I'm sitting there just miserable, like I just need this game to be over so that we can leave and get on with life. It was a fun game, though. What I wasn't expecting was that, I'm sorry, I lost my place. I had my anxious self all convinced that these questions were too deep for this particular night, and if I answered all of them honestly, I was certain that I was going to scare him away. So I defaulted to dancing around, and that kind of brings me to point number 4, which is putting your safety first. What was holding me back from being vulnerable while playing that game? At 30-something years old, I had not yet had a safe space to be emotionally honest with anyone. Every time I had attempted it in the past was usually met with contentious listening, and I was mostly ignored and unheard. I was guarded, and I was afraid of the potential of being hurt. My brain understood that vulnerability actually takes strength and courage, but my programming was that vulnerability is the point at which the weapon of those who say they love you enters your heart. Taking a leap of faith outside my super cozy comfort zone felt like too much of a risk. So in an effort to self-protect, it felt easier to stay on the surface and not get into the mess of who I am. Being honest about who I was and where I came from seemed too heavy and sad. I wanted to be fun and silly. I believed that sharing experiences that were painful or hard would totally bring down the vibe. And even after all the therapy, I still felt so much shame about where I came from. I worried that someone new just learning about my hot mess family stuff would just see me as a bunch of red flags. There can be a lot of shame attached to past experiences when the majority of people in your life end up being dangerous for your creative development. It's impossible to share your dreams and experiences when you're constantly activated in flight or fight. Survival mode isn't a safe space for the zone of creativity. Think about it. That one time when you excitedly shared a new project with a friend or a teacher or a parent, and their flippant response was something like, "Why would you waste your time on that?" Or, "You're not even a good artist, dancer, writer," put whatever you do in that space. Receiving these words from someone you trust can make your heart sink all the way down to the soles of your feet. And rightfully so, because your dreams and aspirations aren't being treated with care. When you hear statements like this enough from people that you thought were safe, you eventually start to believe them, and then you start talking yourself out of dreaming big at all. In the name of being more realistic, of course. That's when the lie creeps in. For me, I was convinced that any time I created something beautiful that I nurtured and cared for, someone else would destroy it as soon as I shared it. So why even bother? I turned this lie into a mantra for years and years. I think it's one of the main reasons that imposter syndrome always shows up for me at my parties uninvited, actually. When I was 5 years old, I had this really beautiful imaginary baby. Her name was Sarah. I loved her and cared for her, and I took her with me everywhere. She was perfect, with chubby little cheeks and blonde curly hair that framed her face so perfectly. No one else could see her, but I knew she needed me, and I saw her so vividly. One Sunday after church, my family gathered at my grandparents' house for a cookout. I was holding Sarah while watching the women in my family cook in the kitchen. My grandfather noticed me with the baby, and he asked if he could hold her. I trusted him, and I told him that he could hold her, but please be careful with her head. I made the transfer as if I was holding a real live baby. As soon as he got her in his arms, he pretended to drop her on the ground, and he stomped all over her with his church shoes. I became completely hysterical as my eyes were witnessing my baby being trampled, and there was nothing I could do about it. My mom and my grandma tried to calm me down, and all they kept saying was, "She's just an imaginary baby." But to me, Sarah was so much more. My grandpa continued laughing in my face while I sobbed. No one at all seemed to care about the murder that had just happened right before our family said grace for our meal. They all just filled their plates and their bellies and went on acting like nothing was wrong. I stood in the kitchen at that moment and resolved to never imagine anything again. It would obviously only lead to more destruction and heartbreak. I told myself, "You don't have an imagination anymore." I locked my feelings away, and for years, even into adulthood, I believed that my creativity died that day with baby Sarah. When you grow up amongst surfacers, people who do not have the capacity for empathy or vulnerability, the moment you experience something that is real, everything changes. It's like seeing something you can never unsee. The surfacers continue their denial and delusion, pretending like everything is okay in their world, when you can plainly see that everything is crumbling. I became deeply depressed trying to live the surface life and meet the standards and expectations of everyone around me. For years, I was under the impression that I existed only to serve the needs of others and not to chase after or explore the things that mattered to me. When your spirit is broken, you don't always realize that you deserve to be whole. I spent a lot of time burying my true self so that the surfacer version of me was pleasing to everyone around. Losing my imaginary baby at 5 years old had very real implications on my future. And that was when I began to learn how to abandon myself in order to appease the people around me who had authority in my life, just so I could survive. Who I was as a person and an artist, the core of who I was, had given up and allowed everyone else's opinions and plans to suffocate me under the weight of it all. Earlier, I said that blind obedience is the antithesis of depth, but second runner-up goes to self-abandonment. In fact, where there is blind obedience, there is self-abandonment. Don't allow someone who isn't living your life to dictate how you experience it. Understanding how to establish and protect healthy boundaries is vital to your pursuit of a deeper life. The fifth and final tool for digging deep is to follow your path. Don't get distracted by other people's plans for you. When I was 18 years old, I was sitting in the Dean of Admissions office at the art school where I was interviewing, and the man conducting the interview flipped through my portfolio and asked me what I wanted to study at his school. I loved animation, and so I told him I wanted to be an illustrator, majoring in illustration so that I could eventually be an animator. He paused and looked up at me and said, "Everyone comes here wanting to major in illustration, and they all dream about working for Disney." He got like really frowny face and he said, "That's a pipe dream. No one's ever going to do that. It's highly competitive. You look like a fashion girl, so you should major in fashion design. We have 100% job placement." He kind of went on to explain the rest of the program, but I wasn't listening. I only heard, "You look like a fashion girl." At the moment, I wish that I had said a lot of things to stand up for myself. I wish I had told him that I'm more than what I appear to be on the surface. I wish I had told him explicitly that regardless of what his opinion was, my dream deserved to be explored, and who is he to put me in a box? I wish I had slammed $10 cash on his desk, told him to use it to buy a ticket to see the movie Legally Blonde starring Reese Witherspoon, which was playing in theaters. And I wish I had said, "A well-dressed woman is on a mission and she is capable of amazing things." But instead of doing that, I stayed silent, not wanting to end the interview in a way that would have reflected poorly on me. My mom and I left that meeting, and as soon as we closed the car door, she turned to me and demanded that I would major in fashion design. She heard 100% job placement and thought, "Oh, thank God she's not going to be a starving artist." And do you have any idea what I did? I stayed quiet, and when I enrolled at that school, I majored in fashion design. My whole career plan shifted because of a sad middle-aged man's perception of me. I was Noelle Woods. To be fair, I have finally found a way to make my career the most and the best, and I'm absolutely so grateful for the experiences I had in the fashion industry that shaped who I am today. I love the career I have. But what if I could have been an amazing animator? Everything creative that I dreamed of got squashed and replaced by other people's ideas of what was an acceptable job for a creative person. Don't question your elders. Do as you're told. That's exactly what I did. But what if I had said, no, this is my choice, so I will not be majoring in fashion? We're given so many opportunities to dig deeper with our choices, with our relationships, with our lives. How often do we give up and surrender too soon? How often do we just want someone to tell us what to do or do the work for us? Earlier this month, I attended a weekend of triathlon races in Madison, Wisconsin. I was cheering on my boyfriend and his amazing friend Leslie, and Leslie's here today. I don't know if you guys have been to any of these races before, but these people are crazy. They're also super inspiring, but I just was blown away by the fact that people could move their body nonstop for hours on end until like it's dark in the morning and it's dark when you finish. Like, I don't know how you do that. But the day before was just like picture perfect, beautiful race day for the half race, and then the next day for the full for Leslie's race. It was shit weather, you guys. Like, it was like 55, super windy and raining all day nonstop, not a single break in the rain. Leslie is a 60-year-old badass who finished a full Ironman race first in her age group. It was awesome. It's probably one of the most incredible things I've ever seen a human being accomplish physically, not to mention the mental hurdles that she was jumping through. On the worst weather day recorded in 20 years of Madison, Wisconsin Ironman competitions, she finished first in her age group. Some of those people who registered for the race that day took one look outside the window and were like, oh, hell no, I'm not coming. That's what I would have done. They didn't believe that they could finish the race before they even began. On this day, they decided that digging deep wasn't worth it or wasn't possible. But while Leslie was terrified and worried about racing on a day that was so dreadful, she showed up at the start line anyway. She pushed through what appeared to be impossible conditions, and she finished on top. Our little group of friends was able to catch her at several checkpoints throughout the day to cheer for her. And one thing I noticed about every athlete that passed us was how much it matters to have someone cheering you on. Just when you think you have nothing left and can't go any further, there's a friend who pops up and says, "You've got this." Or, "I'm so proud of how far you've come."
Or you're my hero.
Or you're my hero.
He's sprayed it every time.
Suddenly, your gas tank is a little more full, and somehow you find the strength to carry on. These tiny moments of support cultivate endurance and help you to withstand the long, hard work of digging deep. Mentally, the challenges of life can be overwhelming and discouraging. Some people take a look at their circumstances and don't take the risk of betting on themselves. They don't race. They don't create. They don't dream bigger. They get stuck and they give up. But we can only defy expectations when we show up ready to play the long game. Quick, viral hits won't sustain a life of depth, and chasing other people's approval will cloud your vision and stifle your creative flow. You will miss the journey and you'll get stuck, always left to wonder that question that's filled with regret. What if? One morning while on vacation, I was walking on a beach and happened upon a dozen freshly hatched baby sea turtles. They were all making their way to the ocean, leaving tiny trails in the sand behind them. It was an awesome sight to see, and I stopped for a moment to watch. Suddenly, I noticed one of the little babies looked like a dead bug, and her fins were just flapping up in the sky. I walked over to see that she was stuck. After a few minutes of watching her struggle, I walked a little closer to her and bent down and picked her up. I held her for a moment, examining her adorable petite face, and marveled at how small her nostrils were. These things can live over 100 years, and they grow to be so massive, and I was holding her in the palm of my hand. It felt like a really significant moment. I took a blurry picture of her, and then I sat her right back down in the sand exactly where I originally found her. Only this time, she was right side up and facing the ocean. I walked away so excited that I had just had this super cool encounter with nature. When I returned home, I was telling a friend about my trip, and this was definitely one of the highlights. After I shared, she asked, "Why didn't you just take her all the way to the ocean? Why did you put her back where you found her? Why not help her on her journey and take her to the place where she was trying to go?" I thought of putting her in the ocean, but I could have picked up all of those turtles and put them in the ocean. I decided to sit her back where I found her because I can't do her journey for her. That would rob her of the experience of traveling from her freshly hatched egg into the mysterious sea, which was her actual rite of passage. If I took her all the way to the water, it would remove the richness and depth from her journey. My role was simply to help her get unstuck. And then she was free and empowered to carry on with her life however she chooses. I will remember this sea turtle for the rest of my life and the lessons that she taught me. In my role as a mother, in my relationships, in my artistic expression and creative pursuits, it's never my job to manipulate things or people into being what I need them to be. It is a privilege to be able to see where people are stuck and help them get back to forward motion on the path that they are carving toward their destiny. There are so many complicated layers to our lives and stories and how we choose to interpret them in creative spaces. But my big question for you today is this: what is it that you're digging for? What inspires you? What challenges you? Where are you stuck? What are you digging for? For me, I discovered that what I am always digging for is sincerity and love. It's what I believe I was missing the most. And I've learned how to cultivate that in my life now so that there is an absolute abundance of genuine, kind, loving souls in my corner. A good number of you are here today, and I could not be standing right here without you. You flipped me over and pointed me in the right direction, and I did not know that I was going to get emotional. But you encouraged me as I tried to uncover and answer this question. You didn't try to do it for me. Many times, answering this question is work you have to do on your own, but it doesn't have to be lonely. Find yourself a community to cheer you on when life gets dark. I think if you need a community, this one's pretty great, so start here. This journey you're on will take you to some places that make you want to give up at least 10,000 times. But when you have friends to share it with, it enables you to go the distance, deeper within yourself, to create something remarkable. Then on the other side, the entire community gets to benefit and be inspired by what you've learned. It is my deepest prayer that we all find the courage to pick up our shovels, roll up our sleeves, and unearth our greatness. Thanks so much for having me.
Wow, that made us ask a lot of questions. I got emotional too, so I shouldn't be the one speaking. Who has a question for our lovely Ashley?
You said you were writing a book, and what is a story that you're like most excited to share in that sort of book?
I think I told it. I think that it's the story about Sarah, my baby, because it felt to me like such a pivotal moment as a kid. And I think those things we carry with us our whole lives can really mess with your brains. And once I finally learned the lesson from that whole experience, I got to unlock so much more within myself. So yeah, I think it's probably that story.
I'll stay on the book trajectory. Tell us what inspired you to write a book. I think a lot of people think you have to kind of go to a traditional publisher and have a huge following, and like there's so much more opportunity now for anybody to put their story out into the world, which is amazing. So I'm just wondering what inspired you to decide to write a book.
Yeah, thanks for that, Claire. Well, first of all, we don't need permission to tell our stories. So self-publish your book, and that's what I'm doing for sure. Like, we don't need to ask a big publisher and go knocking on doors and begging. We can just do it ourselves. And if you have something to say, you should be able to say it. So that's first. And what inspired me, I guess, was just like so much transition in life, and coming out of a divorce and having 2 kids and not having a lot to my name at that point. My story was kind of all I had. And so I poured myself into really understanding, who am I, why am I here? And I started writing for my own healing, and it turned into something else. So, yeah.
All right, thanks so much for sharing today. So I also have 2 baby girls, and I was curious, what are some of the things you're doing to foster their creativity? What are some practices that you've been doing, and what lessons have you learned from that?
Oh, wow. I think that the biggest thing is just giving them space to create. I didn't know I had options when I was a kid. Things were just so boxed in for me, and so opening the world up more and saying, like, this is something you can do, this is something you can do. Even in sports, like, I didn't know that I could play sport. Like, I just thought it was softball only. Like, there was a million other sports. I think just giving them, like, a worldview of, like, there are different kinds of paintbrushes even. Like, what do you want to do? Do it. And then maybe not commenting on how I think that it's a good drawing or a good picture or a good painting or a good writing. It's more like, I can see how hard you worked on that and that it means a lot to you. Because it's not about performance, it's about really expressing yourself.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I can draw. Remember all the things that you are good at, and take that moment to marvel in something that's really obvious to you. Yeah, I can draw. And how amazing that is for whoever you're sharing it with then. That's really special. I think that's something we can take out of today too. Thank you for being here with all of us this morning.